Hello and welcome back to another Backflip Happy Hour. I'm Ryan Frame, co-creative director here at Backflip. Joining me as always is John Shoemaker, other co-creative director. Say hey, John.
Hello.
What
Here
is
I
happening,
am.
man? How are you?
I'm great. I'm good.
Are you ready
Good
to go to
morning.
Apple Holler and eat some apples and shout?
I assume that's what I'll be doing all day long tomorrow.
Yeah. John's going on a shoot tomorrow in the, Kenosha Racine area. Place that I went to in high school, actually, I believe, for a dance, Apple Holler, and doing some filming over there. And my sister and their family are going to hang out with you. So that should be fun.
We're the talent. Yeah.
Yeah. And then your whole family. So that'll be
Yeah.
awesome.
It's going to be great.
Cool. Well, this is a happy hour. It is a little bit early. We bumped it up because our guest, who we'll bring on in a moment, has to get to class. So I'm not actually drinking any alcohol right now because I try to rise to the level of the guest. If, they're not drinking, I don't want them to feel bad, or I don't want to be the guy drinking when they're not drinking. Maybe that's John. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I got an espresso here that I just made because we got that new Nespresso, like we talked about last week. This is actually a decaf. It's like a cold latte, super good. Got some janky pumpkin spice in there, which is really good. And then I have all the other things. I've got some water. I've got some sparkling. I've got some creamy root beer Zevia. When you want the flavor, but want to fit into that bikini, get Zevia. So that's what I got. What do you got?
You have like an airplane like drinking problem like joke going on where like the classic cheesy can't drink is a drinking problem. Only yours is like you just drink all this stuff.
It is a problem.
It's just drinking, but
I'm
just
a
drinking liquid.
drinkaholic. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean if I had like Bailey's or something, I would totally do that. But I don't have anything. I'm never like prepared, especially if I'm here at my house. I have like slim pickings and yeah. So I've got coffee. And if you're wondering, it's Panera coffee.
Ooh, nice.
From the giant order of Panera coffee yesterday. But here's a hack. I don't know if this is good or bad. I guess if you're a coffee connoisseur, you would scoff at this and you'd be really, really not happy. I like coffee a lot, but also sometimes I just don't want to work real hard for it. So the hack is I put the Panera coffee, it's already made, put it in the coffee pot last night, and I set the auto
like
brew
a drip coffee pot
for a time this morning as a way to heat it up. Obviously it didn't need to be made, but it was like timed to heat itself so that when I got up it was hot.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome.
It's
not going to give you any crap for that. Yeah. Yeah. You could have also like put it in the fridge and made some iced coffee. That could have been fun.
Yeah. But I mean,
it doesn't sound like something you'd like.
It's starting to get I do like iced coffee, but it's getting to be we're going to have a warm weekend here, but it's getting to that time of year. Just like cool mornings. Love it.
All right. With that, let's bring on our guest. We got Matthew Pearson here today. What's happening, Matthew? Thanks for waiting patiently while we just blabbed on.
No problem. Thanks for having me. This is great. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks. I think we rescheduled once on you as well. So I appreciate that. But we're here and it's so much fun. It is a happy hour. Like we said, you got to go to class after this, but I believe you do have something you're drinking that you can share with us.
Well, I have, I just have basic, kind of brewed coffee here, and then a glass of straight gin. That always gets me through the class. No, it's soda water. I've become a big fan of soda water in the last few years. Sparkling water. I don't know. I think they say it helps with digestion or something, but I just like it's a little, adds a little life to regular water. That's all. So it's good for your speaking voice too. I think, it keeps the throat clear,
Yeah, I'll take all of that. I drink, this is just CLARB, so this is just
Oh yeah.
CO2 water, but I like it as something that's not just water. Like John and I have talked about it. Just water can be so boring, and so then you tend to, drink more calories or something. But with like sparkling water, it's like you're having something a little fun, a little fancy.
Well, and I think too, the same thing with, a lot of people get into soda. I think they get quasi addicted to soda because of the fizz,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't need that kind of sugar in my life. So this is kind of a workaround, or a little squeeze of lime or something, goes a long way.
Do you make
Mm-hmm.
your own? Do you have like a thing, or is that
Soda Stream?
No, I don't make my own, but I definitely, that's a future idea for sure. Once I get kind of settled into a place for more than, a year at a time, then I'll definitely probably invest in something like that.
Yeah, we've got one of those Soda Streams. We've actually gone through 3 of them. They just keep replacing them because some seals get broken on it.
Oh, okay.
Because we use it so much. Like I'll make like 5 bottles a day.
And you can control the amount, right? Like how fizzy it is.
Yep. I mean, we just always do 3. There's 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. We just always do 3 because it tastes like the normal stuff you get.
Okay.
But yeah, you could change that if you wanted.
I had the Perrier ones with your good friend Father Scott Jablonski.
Mm-hmm.
He had bought some of these Perrier ones, lime flavor, and those things those things burn a little bit. Those things are cranked up. So if you're into that,
I feel like too, there's a difference between and we'll start getting into some meat maybe someday, but this is an important topic.
Very important.
This stuff is like infused, with CO2, like they put CO2 into it. You can actually get naturally occurring sparkling water. So I think Grand Perrier, the French sounding ones, those are actually mostly naturally occurring sparkling water, which kind of blows my mind.
You should send this to him, this clip, and try to get an endorsement.
Yeah,
exactly. Sponsor the show.
Be like, you're going to make so much money. All right. So, a good way to start maybe would be just to have you tell us a little bit more about yourself. We kind of have a little bit of a bio in the description. You're, are you? No. I was going to say you're a beanbag champion, but I don't think you made it that far when we played.
No, I believe we got 3rd place, if I remember right.
Okay. Yeah, that was way better than us because you guys knocked us out the first time. But you're a seminarian at the Diocese of Madison, entering your 4th and final year at the NAC, the North American College in Rome. You got some other stuff in here, but why don't you give us a little bit more about who you are?
Sure. So, so I was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Was born in 1990. Grew up there, went to Catholic school until 2nd grade. And then we moved to a little town called Cambria, which is not far from like Beaver Dam or Columbus, if you know that kind of area. And then I just kind of grew up in a normal small town life, until obviously I graduated high school. So I kind of grew up I went to Catholic school, like I said, till 2nd grade. So I kind of had that exposure, which was, I think, important, for my kind of eventually coming back. So we didn't really go to mass too much, when I was growing up. So I just kind of, was a typical kid playing sports, hanging with friends, wasn't getting in too much trouble occasionally, but sports kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. Because, if you screwed around and, got in trouble, got a drinking ticket or, obviously get involved with drugs, kids these days are even into crazier stuff in school. But, you get into trouble like that, you couldn't play sports. So that was a good motivator for me. I graduated high school. I went down to Northern Illinois University for 2 years, studying media, communications, this kind of stuff. Funny enough, part of the reason I went there was in high school during the summers, I would go and go down and stay with my grandparents outside Chicago and work at a golf course as a caddy. So I did that for 6 summers. So that was, I mean, significant kind of formative part of my life, and that, it's good hard work. It's a totally different environment than I was in small town Wisconsin. Got to meet plenty of interesting people, and then so part of the kind of what they would offer at this place, at this golf course, was, they try to give guys scholarship money and stuff for going off to school. So that's part of
awesome.
why I mean, they probably, in the grand scheme of things, I think they probably saved me probably about $18,000 in student loans over that time period. So a big help. Still got plenty to pay off, but but 18's a bigger number. You add that to it, so that's pretty great. I would go to school, do some media stuff, and then I kind of spent some time working in the working world for 4 or 5 years.
Question there. Studying media, what got you into that? Because obviously John and I, that's what we do, and we also studied media.
Sure.
But what got you into it? What were you interested in?
So I suppose my initial interest was in the sports world. So the idea of being a sports broadcaster. It seemed like, it's all I knew at that time, 18 years old. I thought I'd be good at it. I could, speak decently well. So it just seemed like an interesting path to take. And I would say though, like, I probably got off of that pretty quickly in that first year, because not that I didn't want to be involved in sports, but you just realize how big the media world is and what it incorporates. And then obviously around that time, my interest started to change as far as, getting, it's kind of when I started reverting to the faith, was those first couple years of college. So my interest in my view on the world changed pretty significantly in those 2 or 3 years. And so then media became something, it's part of evangelization. It's part of communicating with people. And also I'm a person I'm not a good artist, but I really like art, like I could never draw, I could never paint, that kind of thing. So what I found with media and with, or photography or videography or even editing, is that you kind of had this power to create artistic things for someone that doesn't necessarily have the talent, but might have the eye for it. So that's kind of something I discovered along the way that kind of kept pulling me back in. Plus the idea of, the world's a really interesting place, telling stories about it, or, people's stories are incredible, so kind of all that together is kind of what kind of pulled me into that world.
Mm-hmm. Could always be a critic.
Yeah. No, that's a different way of seeing the world. I mean, I guess it's necessary in some level, but but usually usually a critic is someone who's also producing, I guess, if you look at it, if I look at it from the theological perspective, the people who are, going back and forth about theology, they're doing theology and they're critiquing the position of somebody else. So they're doing both. And I think that's pretty normal, but to just be one and not the other is kind of strange.
Have you ever seen Boom Goes the Dynamite?
No, I don't think so. Oh, you mean the guy on Reggie Miller, the sports guy?
Yeah, what's his name? I don't actually know his name. Yeah. It's I know him as Boom Goes the Dynamite Kid. He's and boom goes the dynamite. He's failing at his sports casting, but he got to get that catchphrase in. Yeah, that poor guy. Yeah, I don't know if he ever bounced back from that. I mean, hopefully he capitalized on the internet fame, but. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different opportunities out there, especially now. So maybe think about it. At the end of this, you can give us your best Boom Goes the Dynamite, maybe. Okay. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. All right. So you're in college studying that media, and you said you were getting more back into your faith. Yeah. Yeah, let's continue on that.
Sure. So, yeah, well, here's a great crossover of the media and the faith. So, I think it's my sophomore year, and so we have like basically our introduction to editing class, and this was right after the summer of the Catholics Come Home commercial. I don't know if you guys remember that. Okay.
Yes, I was just talking about this the other day, but I couldn't remember what it was. That's the one in the big warehouse where they're projecting an image, right?
Yeah. It was a big campaign.
That's the one I was trying to remember, John.
Yeah. So this would have been the summer of 2009. Catholics Come Home. And then, funny enough, though, it was actually in the fall of that year, which is where the same time frame my story takes place, that Pope Benedict declared a year for priests. So, which I didn't find out till maybe a couple of years ago. But so I'm in this editing class, and I'm thinking about I want to take like a theology class this year. I want to study some stuff about God, So I was looking online for something, and I couldn't take anything at the university because all the classes that are discussed are all law or lawyer classes, legal classes. So I didn't have the prerequisites to take them. So anyway, I don't know if it was a Google search or whatever, but I came across basically what I was an RCIA class. So class to be confirmed, at the Newman Center there on campus. And so I kind of looked into this, and I was like, okay, it looks like they have this theology class thing at, on Sunday nights at this Newman Center. Maybe I'll check that out. And so I wasn't sure though. I was like, yeah, we'll see if I get over there. So it was like a Thursday or something. I'm in this introduction to editing class, and she comes around with like a shoebox. You guys remember they used to have the little tapes, and so she comes around with the little shoebox of what they call them, DV tapes or something. I forget.
Oh yeah. DV cam tapes. Yep.
Yeah. So she comes around with a shoebox. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yep. So she walks around with a shoebox full of these. Everyone has to grab one. And, this was what you're going to practice with. So everyone had like skateboarding or people on the beach, surfing, kind of these activities. And then she was going to walk us through, cutting, how to line up, certain cuts to make it look different or whatever. It was just practice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so the tape I get is it's an interview. It's just a one shot of this Haitian priest who was living up outside of Chicago, and this was right after the earthquake. So the local newspaper, the campus newspaper, went and interviewed him, right? And so they had this one shot of him, and so it didn't make sense for the assignment, but somehow it found it into this box, and it ended up in my computer. So I was like, okay, oh, wow. I think this is that's a pretty clear sign that I better go to this class, on Sunday. So that kind of jumped me into that. And I was proud, it was a powerful moment once I got there and started realizing what the process was. And so I go through RCIA that year, and then Easter Vigil 2011, I was confirmed, received First Communion. I just left when I was in Catholic school as a kid. We just left the year before First Communion, so I was in second grade. So it's especially now for me, I'll be ordained a deacon here in a couple weeks, about 3 weeks from today. And I remember awesome. When, I'm looking back to that confirmation time in 2011, because they also lay their hands on you when you're confirmed. Okay. Like the bishop or a delegate of the bishop lays his hands on you. On the top of your head, you kneel down, and they lay their hands on you. They invoke the Holy Spirit. And so I remember, very clearly that moment. And so now to think that I'm going to go and do that again, 10 years later is kind of wild, and to do it in such a a different way, and a very different sacrament, but very related to the first one. So yeah, it's thanks for letting me go down memory lane there. That was great.
Yeah. And so, for those who don't know, can you describe it a little bit more to, you're wearing a collar, so most people would be like, oh, that's a priest. But, you had just mentioned you're going to be ordained to the diaconate soon, which doesn't sound like priesthood. So where are you at in formation in seminary? What is all that?
Yeah, so the quick kind of breakdown is that there are 5 different designations. So there would be a lector, which is where you read at Mass. There's an acolyte, which is where you serve at Mass. Then there's a candidacy, and then there's a deacon and a priest. These are the 5 that we work with right now. So anyone who becomes a priest has to have those 4 previous titles, those 4 previous orders or installations, you might call them. So I was installed as a lector and an acolyte a couple years ago. And then candidacy might be the better one for understanding why I'm wearing a collar, because candidacy is a public recognition by the diocese that you are studying to become a priest. So it's a movement of you being more or less like what we call a pre-theologian, which is someone who's just studying philosophy and theology, to this is a formal acceptance that the bishop is saying, okay, I think this man is able to complete his theological studies, and he is going to promise that in front of the church. Therefore, in most places, that means you can present yourself as a cleric, or at least present yourself in the collar, because it's a public type thing. So then after candidacy, comes diaconate. And sometimes those first 3, the order can be a little different, but that's mostly how it goes. And then there's diaconate, which I'll do in about 3 weeks, and then followed by priesthood next summer. So it's moving quick now. It's about 9 months to go here. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Do you have people coming up, and how do you respond? Because I think most people who don't know, they probably just start referring to people as father. You see the collar and whatever.
Yep.
So what do you do with that? I suppose, you can still minister to them, but do you correct them?
Yeah. Or? Yeah, no, it's just a habit of a lot of people. They don't, because you don't really want to call someone a seminarian. It's kind of a weird word, like, hey, seminarian Matt, it's just a weird phrase. So people, it's funny, my entire time in the parishes, people always want to know what they call you. They're always asking that, like, what do we call you now? And I'm like, really, I'm not I don't have any special title yet. I'm just like, I'm a mister, I guess, so, but then, but still, even I've told people that directly to their face. I go, yeah, actually, I really don't have a title. I won't be a deacon until next year, and then a priest, and then you call me father. And, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of odd, but yeah, just call me Matt, just call me Matthew. And they'll go, I'll explain it to them, and they'll go, okay, thanks for that explanation, Father. And then they'll walk away. So it just, people like to say it. And so a lot of people do say it. But the funny thing is, and I'll see how this works, but I've heard from other priests that people may call you father while you're a seminarian. They may just use the title, but I have yet to have somebody ask me, like, if I can hear their confession, or if I can, maybe like a couple people have asked if I can bless something like a rosary or something. I tell them I can't. But I've heard that once you're ordained, then those people who don't know you, they don't know who you are, but they'll approach you and like it's like the Holy Spirit tells them that you're actually a priest who can actually hear their confession or can bless something for them or whatnot. But it doesn't, they wear their collar the whole time for 5-6 years and it doesn't happen. And then all of a sudden you'll be ordained and it happens. So I'll keep you guys posted. I'll let you know how that goes.
Interesting.
Yeah. And where are you right now, by the way?
So currently I'm still here in Wisconsin. So I'll be flying back. I'll be flying back to Rome next week. Actually, I'll be flying back. And then I'll go on my canonical retreat. Before you receive holy orders, you have to go on a mandatory 5-day silent retreat. So I'll have to go on that when I fly back, and then ordination week will begin on the 23rd or something like that, 25th. So yeah, it'd be pretty fun. It'd be a fun time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. There's 22 of us being ordained in my class at St. Peter's. So.
And that's St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Is that?
That's right. Yep. That's right.
That's pretty special.
Yeah, no. I've been to 3 of them previously, from the classes before me. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's just an amazing place. Plus it's really more about, in some respects, the family and friends and people that can come over, of them getting to experience it. Because I've spent a lot of time in St. Peter's, but family and friends and people that come over, obviously it's a special moment for them to just see the place, but then to witness something that they don't get to witness very often, maybe a handful of times in their life, depending on how, and not just that, but to do it in that place, so it's special for the man, it's special for the family and for the whole college. So yeah, it's a great experience.
I like that too. Your Catholic flex there. You're like, I get to hang out at St. Peter's. Like it's not that big of a deal for me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because during COVID, it was basically, it's harder in the last, 25 years. Apparently it's been harder to go to St. Peter's than it used to be. So there's a lot more security and things. So if you want to go to St. Peter's, unless you're there at like 6:30 in the morning, where you can get in maybe 15 minutes, you got to wait, a good, 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour to get in.
Oh, okay.
But during COVID, there was no wait. So I could literally leave my room and I could be in St. Peter's in about 8 minutes or something, it was pretty nuts. That I could just literally walk right in like it was my parish, So I took advantage of that, plenty, and spent a lot of time in there. And it was kind of weird without a ton of people in there. I'll say that, it wasn't that cool, but it was nice to see the people come back this past spring. That was nice, but yeah, it was a unique time.
Yeah, we got a question here from Carolyn, kind of relates to your previous story. So how do you see your interest in media and that kind of thing related area working into your ministry or further ministry as a priest, or do you?
Yeah, I think I plan on it, even just from the perspective of it's somewhat of a hobby of mine too. So like it's good to have hobbies as a priest. It's good to have hobbies for any line of work, really. And it's a creative outlet. It's something that's a good, pastime in some respects. If you're editing something you like, you guys know this, if you're editing something that you like, it doesn't really feel like work sometimes. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It just feels like, you're in the zone. And so I like that. And I also, from a ministry perspective, I think there's there's a ton of stories you can tell in the church, whether it's even just, the old lady in your parish whose, husband died 5 years ago, but her house looks like a church. Put her down in front of a camera and ask her a few questions. What was it like? What's it like? How was your marriage? People have cool stories And it's like, why not use that to kind of educate your parish, or, just celebrate someone's life and what God's done in their life, So it seems like there are simple ways to use media to kind of help the ministry.
We've been talking some about, like witnessing is always, we came up, anyone who came up through, maybe St. Paul's or any sort of like vibrant young adult program, knows that witnessing is like one of the strongest ways to encourage people and, change hearts. And you can do that, like you said, through just like telling stories, getting, using video clips of people, like, well, let's get those stories out there, because it can be challenging to get everybody in front of everybody else to hear those inspiring things. So,
no, this is an interesting homiletic thing from one of my classes. Like, so liturgically, so within Mass or within like the structured prayers of the church, it's only, this is canon law, it's only a deacon, a priest, or a bishop who can proclaim the gospel and preach. Okay. So it seems like, oh, that's not fair. Like, how you mean people that can't preach the gospel? Like, how does that work? Well, the way that people who are not ordained preach the gospel is precisely what you just said. It's in telling people their testimony, proclaiming the glories of the Lord, singing the mercies of the Lord, telling a friend at work, telling your children, telling people around you what God has done for you. That's preaching the gospel. That's the way people who are not ordained preach the gospel. So developing that skill within the church, developing that normalcy of something like that, getting people to practice their story a little bit, like thinking about what God has done in their life, different times where he has intervened. That's the gospel. It's their gospel, but it also belongs to the church. It belongs to everybody. What God has done for you, what God has done for me, it belongs to the whole body of Christ. So just like the scriptures belong to the whole body of Christ. So getting people into that frame of mind and realizing that there's tremendous power, sometimes more power than a boring homily from a priest. There's more power in a testimony of somebody who sings the mercies of the Lord. So it's a very powerful thing. So I agree totally.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder too. And for anybody who's listening to the Bible in a Year podcast, with who is it, Father Mark Schmitz from Ascension Press. We've come through Judith. We're in Jeremiah. We're in Lamentations, and there's a lot of personal stories in there, and that's a good reminder that our lives and our stories are, and hopefully can be, or often are, stories of faith. And so that is an important thing to talk about and to share with each other. And I guess I've never heard that, how do we, share the gospel or homilize? Well, we can tell our stories and tell our experiences. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, it's important to remember, because people tend to want to create these divisions between the priesthood and the laity. And there are theological differences that are very important to maintain those distinctions, but the whole body of Christ is moving towards one thing, right? It's moving towards heaven together, union with God, and everyone has their different part to play, their role to play. So it's important to know what that is and how it works. And in some ways, woe to me if I don't preach the gospel, said St. Paul. So like, it's in some ways it's, if you're not telling people about what God has done for you, there's a certain level that, that you're a sin of omission, maybe, where you're not proclaiming the gospel in the way that you can. A great message is, priests can't be in, hospitals. Priests can't be in the factories. Priests can't, drive taxi cabs, all these different jobs that people have.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be in all these places to proclaim the gospel, you might say. But it's through the laity that's accomplished, because they are there and they do have a gospel to share. It's the gospel of the church, but it's also their testimony and what God has done for them. That's what's going to really, you're right, change people's hearts and move them towards, towards conversion and towards piety and all these things. That's part. I mean, if you look at the structure of the Mass, part of the theology is that the whole community of believers comes together for the Sunday Mass, for the liturgy of the parish, and then at the end of Mass, the old in the Latin, it's ite missa est. It is sent, or go, it is sent, and you can interpret that as like, you've all received the grace of God. You've received salvation. You've received the gospel. You've received all that the church has to give you, Christ himself. Now go and give it to the whole world in your own specific area. So there's a certain coming together and then a departing to spread the gospel. So it's a great image to keep in mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I'm having a little bit of internet slowness. Am I frozen for you guys, or am I good?
Looks good to me.
Around.
All right. Awesome. What was it like? Because you said, with COVID, were you in Rome when all the crap hit the fan? Like, what the heck was that like?
Yeah, I was there. Let's see. Yeah, it was. We started hearing stuff, I suppose, right in March, and then it kind of quickly moved. It quickly changed on like what was happening, and we didn't quite know how to react. We were kind of waiting for the CDC, or waiting for these different government entities to kind of give some guidance. We were talking to the State Department, or not the State Department, but the embassy, in Rome. We're talking to them about how should we proceed in different ways. And the initial decision was to just kind of just hang out and keep us there. And the administrator at the time, he had ordered like an extra month or 6 weeks or something of provisions in case there was a backlog or something, back order, so that we could, if there was some reason that everything had to shut down, literally like food and supplies had to stop, that we had enough to last us, for quite a while, for the whole house. Because, when you have 160 guys or something at the time, it's like, you need a lot of provisions. So he had done that, and then it kind of kept getting dicey. Bishops weren't sure what was going on as far as their guys and if to bring them home. And then finally a decision was made that if your bishop wanted you to go home, that you had permission to go home. That was right before Trump made the announcement of like, we're going to close the borders to certain countries. And so Italy was on that list.
Like Italy, yeah.
So at that time, we didn't quite know, are they literally not going to let in flights? But it became pretty clear right after that, well, if you were a U.S. citizen, you were going to get in no matter what. But we just weren't sure. So that's when they allowed bishops to like call their guys home if they wanted. So I'd say maybe about 60 guys left, like within a couple days after that. And about maybe 100 stayed because they weren't, they were like, so we kind of had this split. Guys started doing online classes and stuff. And then about 2 weeks later, that's when the embassy communicated to the college that there was the possibility of certain, I think if I remember it right, like certain medical things could be delayed. And so when it got to that point where it was like, it was pretty unlikely, but the fact that it was even being discussed, that's when they made the decision that I think we need to send everybody home. So then about 2 weeks later, everybody went home. The mass exodus, as they call it. So, and then I don't know, at least back here in Madison, we all just got assigned to parishes, and which I initially wanted to go home when I realized how kind of wild things were going to get. Not just for myself, but I knew that all of our priests were going to be locked up also. Like
Mm-hmm.
they were going to be, locked down, and it's already tough living alone as a priest, and it's even tougher when you don't have really a parish to take care of, and people aren't coming to mass, and all that stuff. So I thought it would be better for us to be in the diocese to help the diocese, whatever way we could. So that's what most of us did. We were with priests for about those 2-3 months, and then obviously the summer. So it was good enough time. I watched a lot. I watched the entire Breaking Bad series with Father Garrett. I watched, I think, all of Downton Abbey also. Lord of the Rings. We just kind of did the whole
Nice.
the different epics, and whatnot. So it was good
from
time.
one series to the next. Yeah.
That's right.
Also, I mean, you talk about like Breaking Bad. Somebody maybe post the showrunner or writer, but I do believe that the purpose of that show is to show what it's like, kind of the descent into, choosing hell or choosing wrong or choosing evil, one small step at a time, and then that's certainly what happens to Walter White. Is he's trying to make something for his family, but it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And then he becomes the bad guy. I'm the one who knocks,
Yep. Yeah, no, that series, I really am such a huge fan of that series, because there's incredible depth to what's happening, but the writing is just phenomenal. I mean, the way that the story is told, the deep psychology that's at play, that has such powerful, not just spiritual themes, but just human themes, just who we are, trying to understand who we are. But yeah, I've thought about that show a lot, because I think people tend to think it's about like a concrete decision of like choosing evil or choosing good, or the slow descent.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But I really think that show is more about a subtly, it appears subtle. It's Walter White's damaged identity and his damaged ego that he had been burdened with his whole life. He could never like himself. So he actually hated himself. He hated who he became. He hated what his life was, his identity, his position, his job, his role as a father, his role as a husband. Like every aspect of his life, he did not like himself. So as soon as the opportunity presented itself, this is why identity, I feel like as my spiritual life has gone on, the concept of identity has become very important to me. And something I think the world needs to hear. But his identity was so corrupted that as soon as he was given the opportunity, presented with it, to change that and take on a new identity, he just jumped at it. He had to, because the urge was there, the disgust was there, the opportunity presented itself, and he took it. And I do think there's actually some. I'm kind of rambling on, but I do think there's some really interesting like male psychology. The brings to a man that he be successful, right? That he be like, you need a certain level of accomplishment. There's different, like, it's true that it will eat at a man if he amongst his peers, if he feels as though he is not someone who can accomplish something and succeed. So like a lot of our a lot of our, back in the day, even like the Boy Scouts and different men's organizations, there were like these rites of passage that we naturally did because we realized how important it is for a man to feel successful, accomplished, even with his own weaknesses, right? And to be, accepted by his peers as someone who can do something. The spirituality that would come into that would be, even if you can't do anything, right, you're still accepted.
John, you're frozen, but I think you're trying to jump in.
Who, has I had a little internet glitch as soon as I couldn't tell whether there was a gap. I have a friend who makes a big deal out of trying to create opportunities for his son and like his son's friends to do kind of like big achievement type trips, whether it's a wilderness trip or like hiking, going up a mountain. He's kind of like, we're going to have angst, they're going to have something where they want to achieve, they want to push the boundaries of something, and challenge themselves. And I want to give them an outlet for it that is, I want to give them an outlet that is healthy, that they meet that desire without going into other things. And I think that's one of the other part. I mean, your analysis is really cool of Breaking Bad, but the other thing is that there's an opportunity, like you could be struggling with your identity and not liking it, but when you have a choice between, okay, do I do this? I have one bad thing, like it's just a small thing, and it's that we always joke about this at work because it always seems to be like the Ocean's 11, movies, and everything is just like one last job. And it's like, can I do just one questionable thing and then I'm done, And I think that's the other lesson of that show, is that until you come back and repent, or until you come back and admit that it was wrong and actually face the consequence, you will always be chasing your tail from that one last previous thing, because to try to keep it covered takes you down a spiral, so you never, you can't just like do the one thing, never answer for it, and then you're good. You'll always have to answer for it. And that's kind of the thing that I've always appreciated about that show creator, that like he's showing that the reality of this is like you always have to answer for it. You can't run away from it forever.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, from the spiritual perspective, is that if you see Walter White's progression, the progression initially in the middle stage is that in some ways he's shocked at his evil. Because he's still trying to live in his previous identity, right? And he slowly becomes more and more shocked by the level of depravity that he sinks to. And I think that the pivotal moment, this is so well captured in the show, is when he lets the girl choke to death. That he can't believe that he actually allowed that to happen. Like, he did it for the evil intention because he knew that she was bad to his business and all this stuff, and that it was better that she be dead, right? He knew that from an evil perspective. But then when he actually didn't do anything, he reinforced, or he exposed to himself how evil he was, and then he gets emotional. He can't believe how evil he was. And you have, from that perspective, you have two choices. This is a big thing with women and men who engage in some sort of abortion or something, right? you either get really loud or you get really quiet. So you either completely embrace the discovery of how evil you are, and then that's what he does, right? He just keeps going deeper and deeper and becomes that person, or you get really quiet and then you hide, and you never talk about it. Whereas, right, the Catholic perspective is kind of the middle route, where you admit it, you get loud about it in a certain respect if you confess it, right? If you go to confession, you have to speak it. You have to speak it out loud. But then you also get quiet about it, and that you realize that God is drawing near to you, and that you don't have to, no one, you don't have to go advertise your sins to the world, right? You're not required to yell your sins to the world. You're required to confess them to God, right? To a priest, and be absolved. But you have the right to a good reputation, kind of thing. So it's like, it's that middle ground that we try to push. You are going to encounter evils in your life. You're going to discover things about yourself that you don't like, or failures. From the male perspective, like we were saying, you're gonna have times where you fail and are judged by other men and women to be either not masculine, or unsuccessful, or ugly, you know what I mean, unathletic, all these things that really kind of can bruise the ego of a man. And you may encounter those
really
things.
Personal.
Yeah. I just see so much of this. I spend too much time on Twitter, right? So like I use Twitter as like a cultural kind of map, and seeing how people think, right? And I think a lot of men that sit, and play video games and, do these Twitter personas or hide behind a computer in different ways, it's because they're kind of afraid of being judged, right, out in the culture, because they don't necessarily like themselves, right? They've discovered something about themselves they don't like, and it's been judged, and they've been humiliated in some way. And that's what I'm trying to get, that's what the whole church is trying to bring out. No, you're a child of God. Own that identity. Be who you are in all your weakness and all your sin, and let God love you in that. And that's really where spirituality comes from. That's really where grace comes from.
I'd love to see, maybe we could do it too, like make an analysis of the show and forgiveness, because like that point you're making, season 2, I think it is, when he lets Jesse's girlfriend die. I just looked it up real quick too. And originally he flipped her on her back, essentially making her choke and die. But the network's, producers didn't like that, because they're like, no, he's turning too early. So she flips on her back by herself, and he runs to her side. And Bryan Cranston apparently wrote down pros and cons of her dying, to try to experience it. And it's like, it's like she's going to kill Jesse. She's a junkie, drain on society, blah, blah, blah. Or those are cons. Or sorry, those are his pros. And then the cons are, could be my daughter, she's a person. Like, it's all like kind of the normal human decency things that he made, kind of in the con list of like, should I let her live? And it is the first time that we see him choosing wrong. And I'm trying to think now, or at least not choosing wrong, but mentally making that choice between A and B. Because I feel like like you said, there's just a lot of series of things that happen, and, he makes decisions and does things, but it's not until that point that he's really aware of what the choices that he's making, and he makes it. And that's what it's Vince Gilligan. He wants to turn Mr. Chip into Scarface. And I think that's the first instance we see that. And I'm curious, like, what forgiveness is like in the rest of the show. Cause I feel like there is forgiveness, and, especially with Walter and his wife, and then eventually with Walter and Jesse, there's some forgiveness, but I have to imagine that it's like tainted, in some regard, because that's kind of what you were summing up there towards the end. We are children of God, we are fallen, but we fall and we get picked back up, or we're ready to be picked back up. and there's that forgiveness that's always there for us.
Yeah, a couple ways to go with that. The unique thing, and this is from Father Garrett, who you guys know. He had said when we were watching it, he goes, "It's interesting. There's never a reference anywhere in that show to any kind of religion, at least that I can remember. There's no like office where it's like, oh yeah, I went to church on Sunday. There's like zero reference to anything religion based. So I think it's purposeful, right, from Vince Gilligan and from the writers, that they wanted to create this sterile world where man was kind of left to his own device, you might say, of like the natural course of man, will to power, kind of a Nietzsche kind of idea, right? But I think when you talk about it seems that maybe he and his wife have a forgiveness, or he and Jesse have a forgiveness between each other as the series comes to an end. I would say it's not a forgiveness. I think what it is, it's an acceptance of who that person really is. So Jesse and Walter's wife, they both come to an acceptance on a certain level that Walter is a psychopath. Like, they come to that acknowledgement that in some ways it was always there, and it finally came out. He hid it, and I wouldn't say he's a psychopath in the clinical sense. I would just say that he became a purely narcissistic minded person, where he put his desires, his will above all else. All the relationships that he had built in his whole life, he sacrificed for creating essentially this identity that he desperately needed, right? And so he tried to be Jesse's father figure, and Jesse fell for that. But really, he was always using Jesse. But Jesse needed a father figure, right? He tried to be like a husband who cares for his wife. He could only do that through the illegal stuff. And he tried to always say to his wife that I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this to be a good husband, because he never felt like a good husband or a father, because he had his son was crippled. So that was another, like, it's just like a bruised ego thing for him, But so it's really that they just come to acknowledge that he was always a liar.
What's really interesting too about him when he's always saying, like, I'm doing this for you, is that you could even take that identity part, and you could point out that there's actually a lot of people that do that without doing like illegal bad stuff, that he's always saying, like, I'm doing this for you, but did he ever like ask her if that's what she wanted? Like we feel, as men, as husbands, as fathers, or whatever, like we need to do certain things. We feel that pressure, societal pressure, to like provide and do a certain thing. And I think even if you're not like just outright doing something evil, there is a trap to like, well, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for the family. Like, especially the way that a lot of men feel pressured to pursue their careers,
Yep. No, I think what you're pointing out is it emphasizes how important honesty is, because this is a great line from Joseph Pieper, who's a philosophy, wrote a lot of philosophy books. But the one I read a couple years ago is called "The Concept of Sin," and he basically said, he's like, because the human person was made in the image and likeness of God, you have to recognize that, I'm paraphrasing, but you have to recognize that the same power that you have to behold God face to face, to behold all truth, all goodness, all beauty, you have that power in your soul. That same power is capable of infinite self-deception. It's such a great line. That's a direct quote, infinite self-deception. And so what that means, though, is that the human mind is so powerful that it can literally create things that aren't real. This is the new Matrix is coming out, like the human mind it can dream of things, it can project things, it can think of art and then make it come to life, like it can do these amazing things, but it can also completely lie and trick the mind into believing something that's not real. I mean, this is, if you go from a psychology perspective, this is what split personality disorders and things like that are about, or traumas from your childhood that create these things. You literally create a defense mechanism that's so powerful, you begin to think it's real. And so not believing a lie about yourself is critical to being an actual human person, to being a person living in reality. So that's why, again, I go back to identity, because if you know who you are, everything else is going to fall into place. That's one of the most fundamental things that you can lie to yourself about. So for a Christian, there's always the back and forth between, am I a child of God or am I a sinner? That's an identity crisis. What actually am I,
Yeah. Well, and so many things come down to that. That's really cool. I like analyzing things in that way too. I've got a lot of intelligent family members. I've got a sister who's a lawyer, and so we have these discussions about things. And sometimes I'll be oh, I'm aware of the art of argument. I know how to talk about the minute details of things and kind of work our way into that. But there's a truth sitting up above, from a higher vantage point of all this. And the identity aspect you're bringing up is really interesting, because it's isn't that what a lot of fighting is about now too?
Yep.
Is different groups trying to claim individuals, for themselves, and then say that that's your identity. Your identity is a political party that you affiliate with. Your identity is that what you eat, whether you do or don't eat,
vaxxer or anti-vaxxer.
Your identity, they're saying, is wrapped up in all of this, and that's the thing. You are one-dimensional. And if you don't have a grounding to say well, no, my identity is here as a child of God, as a son of God, as a daughter of God, you can be pretty lost.
Yeah.
Quick.
Well, that's fascinating. And I feel like we hear this from great rhetoricians. I just said it to Max earlier today. No one cares what you think unless they think that you care, or no one cares what you know unless they know that you care. And to the point of you are this, if we disagree on a topic, it's very easy, especially with the media, to be you are this. And so we have no common ground and we can't discuss this. We're just going to shout at each other. But as Catholics, as Christians, as just good citizens, we're called to more than that, to say, okay, well, we have a disagreement. You believe this, I believe this. But there's more commonality in there than there likely is disagreement as well. And that idea that, my friend is this, or this is happening to my friend, or my friend thinks this. How do I reach them? How do I convert them or whatnot? And I love the answer. It's we've asked them how they're doing.
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on in their life? Have you walked daily with them? It's like, wait, no, teach me the arguments to convince them. And it's never, there's certainly a time and a place for that type of thing. But like John said, there's the art of argument. And then there's what? Real listening and connection and sharing. And it doesn't matter that I have an opinion and you have an opinion, and they're very different in that sense, because we can connect on a human level. And once we do that, then we have a chance at those other things. Maybe my opinion needs to be changed, but I'm not going to listen to somebody until they're walking along with me daily.
Well, I think that's a thing that there's even like a saying in law school I heard from my sister, is like, they say, like, there's the defense's side, there's the prosecution side, and there's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think an interesting way to come at some of that is the concept of authority. So like the main thing that gives us faith in what Jesus said is because he had the authority to say it. Or to put it another way, because he said it, that's why it's important. It's not what he said. I mean, it is, but like the message depends on who's giving the message and if they have the authority to give that message. So it's like it's a nice platitude to say, love your enemies, but it's really not that important. It's really not that important for a Christian, except for the fact that it came from the lips of Jesus. That's why it's important to listen to it, because he has the words of everlasting life. He rose from the dead, so his words have an authority. So when it comes to these different argumentations or ways of speaking to people, it's not just about the argument. The argument is not, it's not just about the right saying or the right thing, like you're mentioning.
The rhetoric. Yeah.
It's about, where does that come from, and who has the authority to say those things. So like a great example is, if I say you're under arrest, it doesn't mean anything. But if a police officer says you're under arrest, it means a whole different thing. It's just like we already acknowledge the reality of this type of concept in certain ways, but we got to keep going up the ladder to do it about God and to do it about what there's only one guy who rose from the dead, well, I guess Lazarus did too, but because of one other guy, because of Jesus. So like, but there's only one man who, rose from the dead, walked the earth in a glorified body, and ascended to heaven. So he has the authority to tell us who we are. And who did he tell us we are? Children of the Father. That's who he told us we are. So like, that's important. That's important to listen to. That's important to shape your life with. But yeah, that's when it comes to all these things, developing an authoritative structure of how you argue with somebody is really important. It's where you have to start, because we don't believe in that too much anymore.
Mm-hmm. I love this whole Breaking Bad tangent that we went on, because
I could talk about that show for a long time.
Well, and John and I feel that like we do this art, and other people tell stories. There's many different reasons, but typically when we create stuff, there's a purpose to it. Our purpose might be different than what somebody else receives from it as well. But we want to do things, even if it's advertising a construction fan. We want somebody to, who watched that, to experience something, have an emotion, walk away from that experience with more positivity, more joy, more happiness, more thoughtfulness, things to think about, whatever it is. There's lots of different positive things that can come out of a video. And I know, it kind of gets me sometimes when people are like, oh, we don't have Netflix, we don't watch TV, we don't, and sometimes it's coming from a good place. Other times it's not. Maybe I'm just receiving it in a bad place. I'm like, well, what do you do for stories? Like, how do you share and tell stories? Because like I watched, what was it? This is a good one, The Lobster. And it's so weird. And it's like Donnie Darko, so weird. And if you read the byline, you're like, that sounds stupid. I'm not going to watch it. But then you watch it and you have this human experience, you know, or you talk to that old parishioner who is always walking slowly in front of you and you're in a hurry to get around her, to get out. If you know, take a minute and hear her story, you're like, oh my gosh, you were doing what? You know, during World War II or after World War II, and you did this and you did that and you sacrificed this for your family. And like, oh my gosh, I'm changed from this story. Certainly
Yep.
there's nutrition, you know, there's candy TV that
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of substance, but it gets me sometimes when people are like, oh,
I think
we don't do that.
Yeah, I think it's that sometimes you're hearing or people are saying it in a place of judgment, judging people that do watch it. Like, it is important, obviously, more and more to be really careful about trying to make sure that you're filtering stuff or choosing things that are like age appropriate, because like our kids aren't analyzing the shows in the way that we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not. And so you have to like find a way to tie some lesson to it if you're going to go with something that's more intense. And again, it needs to be appropriate for them. But I think there's another part of it that you reminded me of. Like, I've heard of people talking about like, they don't like read fiction, you know, or like don't consume fiction. And it's like, so they're all about they're trying to like build themselves up with this like not wealth of knowledge and get better at, you know, whatever thing. But it's like there's a lot of truth in fiction, in storytelling, that you're just like setting aside and not, you know, perceiving as valuable when you're doing your nonfiction, trying to like gain another skill or something. Like, Jesus told a lot of stories that there's, and then we analyze them like in depth, you know, through great talks and great homilies and stuff about, here's a simple story about, you know, a son who took off and took his inheritance early and whatever. Like, it's just a story, but like the level of, I've heard extensive, you know, analysis on all of these different stories, that fictional stories that Jesus told.
Well, I think I
Yeah.
just did too. What we talk about, what we were talking about earlier, like identity. Like if somebody's like, "Oh, I don't like this thing that you like," I'm immediately like, "Well, what's wrong with you?" Because you know, to some degree, it may feel like an attack on my identity, and it's important to separate that. Like again, it's not an attack on my identity that somebody doesn't watch Netflix, and we can certainly have a conversation about, you know, fiction stories and things like that. But it's funny that like that is an easy common reaction. Like we disagree, that's a personal attack on me and I'm judged. It's like wait, let's not do that. That's incorrect.
Well, no, part of accepting your own identity and being comfortable with who you are, what follows from that is that you accept other people for their identity or for their weaknesses or for their strengths. So it's like, you know, when you meet someone who's better than you at something, give thanks to God that they've been given that talent, right? When you meet someone who's weaker than you, right? Don't look down on them in a way that takes from who they are, because they're still a person, right? Who's a child of God, who is capable of love and deserves to be loved, right? That's their fundamental identity. Real quick though, on the prodigal son, it's a great little lesson. You know, the parable you were just mentioning in identity, because it's a perfect identity story. He says the prodigal son leaves, and he says, you know, he goes into a life of debauchery, and he says, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. He attempts to change his identity, right? Because of his sin, he no longer thinks he's the son of the father. And the son, or the father, responds, my son who was dead is alive. So he reaffirms, you've always been my son. Whether you're in my house or out of my house, you were always my son. Your identity never changed. You, in some respects, changed how you viewed yourself. You lied to yourself. You tried to act like you weren't my son, right? So anyway, that's just a quick sidebar. But on Netflix, when they say, "Oh, you're binging," "Oh, just Netflix binge," "Went on Netflix binge," what do they think? This is where storytelling is important. People need stories in their life. There's reason people binge on Netflix. What do they think people did before Netflix? They binged on books. That's what they did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People read so much before movies and stuff, right? They would literally lock themselves in their rooms and just read books. So they go to the library and they read books. That's how they relaxed, right? Now, so that's, you could argue that it's better to read a story and have your mind form how it looks and the characters. That's from a
Mm-hmm.
synopsis standpoint. Maybe your brain is healthier that way, but it still shows the fundamental craving of the human person to be involved in other people's stories, right? As an observer.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't do a ton of fiction reading. And I found that over the years, the way that I get my stories is through, I listen to a lot of Johnny Cash. And so I've kind of discovered about myself that, or singer-songwriters in general, I should say, I like to hear those stories. I like when someone is able to write a song about a story that is so foreign to me. This was great. This is a few weeks ago, but I was driving back to Cross Plains late at night, like 10 o'clock, and beautiful night, windows down. I had Johnny Cash on, and there's this song, and it's a super sad song. It's about a mother who's died. She got a young child, and they're loading her casket on the train to be taken away, right? And it's like what the Irish would call a dirge. I mean, it's just a really it's just a really sad song. But I'm like, why do I like this so much? Like, I'm sad right now. I'm like, this is really bringing me down, but it's making me feel good at the same time, because I'm like entering into something. I'm entering into human pain and human weakness in this beautiful way through this poem, through this song. And it's catharsis, you might say. It's cathartic. You enter into something painful, but it makes you feel good. It makes you feel alive, and people need that. So yeah, that's kind of a tangent on that, but it's storytelling.
Yeah, no. I love that too. Like, I like weird and sometimes depressing movies, and my wife's like, "Why do you want to watch that?" And it's that, like, I don't experience some of those emotions, or some of those, many of those experiences, and so to walk with somebody, to journey with them, kind of pulls your heart out of your chest and can transform it and put it back in, because hopefully I don't have crazy tragedy like some of I was going to say a Wakandan genocide, like the genocide in that what was it, that one hotel movie? Dang it! Somebody in the comments help me out.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hotel Rwanda, is that it?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, but the whole idea of story, like, what did people do before Netflix? Well, they watched TV and went to plays. I mean, we still have all these things. We still have TV and plays, right? What do we do before those? We read. Okay, well, we still had plays when we had books. Well, what did we do before books? Well, we just had plays and storytelling, like sitting around a fire telling stories. We do a lot of work with indigenous peoples, and so like story and telling your story is huge. And so we had that, for, I don't know, as long as we've been around, I guess.
Hey, before we run out
for that, go ahead. You got to leave in 7.
Yeah, no. Before we run out of time, tell me a little more about Backflip. How did you guys get into found the company? I know it might be a long story, but what are some of your guys' projects and kind of interests and film styles, maybe?
Quick question for that. Do you have a hard stop at 12:30?
No, it's not a hard stop. No.
Okay. Because that might be more than a 7-minute answer. John, what do we do here?
Around 12:30 is fine. Within 5 or 10 of that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to answer that question.
We're storytellers.
Yeah, Yeah. I mean, you can tell we're jaded by that phrase, you know, because everybody's using it. But
It's accurate, but we despise it.
so Ryan's wearing a shirt with a cliche that we came up with that tries to encapsulate what we were about. Let's make awesome. We kind of, the way that we have approached things with our company is that, like, there is something awesome about every person, business, whatever it is, and we want to, like, find that thing and then present it in a really, like, fun, awesome, creative way. And that might sound a little, like, obvious, like, isn't that what everybody's doing? But we've actually found that no, that's not, like, the way that, like, so we're often trying to convince clients, you know, when they're like, it's just a basic, simple corporate video. We're like, well, by the time you've said that phrase, you've just, like, undersold your whole thing. Like, you shouldn't use the word just in your request for what you want to make, you know, okay, so it's supposed to be boring, supposed to be blah, like nobody's supposed to watch it, what, you know. So we've done a lot of, like clients to, like, just because you're an accounting firm doesn't mean that the people there only care about numbers and spreadsheets. You know, to use our Netflix example, they go home in the evening and they watch the same popular shows that everybody watches. Like, we're entertained and motivated and moved by the same stuff. So yes, it's not going to be the same as, like, it's not going to be the same as a laser tag place, you know, and their, like, advertising in their video. But, like, there's a reason that people here are passionate about what they do. Can we get at that somehow? You know, can we talk about, and so we try to get into some truth, you know, like, what is everybody pursuing? Like, what do people want at the end of the day? They want less stress and, like, more time with their family and more security. But why do we want security? Just so that we feel good and we're taking care of our family and we get to enjoy life. So it's like we try to, like, pursue those things when we're you know, making projects. And then we've got our own kind of, like, our humor and our goofiness and our flair that gets into things. And so people seek us out for that because they kind of know what we bring in terms of our personality. But, like, that's the underlying piece of it, is what we're going after. And I think the way we started the business is that when you know, we were young and we were hungry and we saw that not being done everywhere, you know, and
especially in the church, like, so bad.
Gosh.
Yeah. No, the church is, like, I mean, word on fire from you know, Bishop Barron. That's the first kind of opening salvo of the church's role in the media, but it should have never taken that long. I'm glad it's happening, but even for, you know, for priests, you know, it's like, I know you're not called to you know, be a media personality, and I don't suggest that for priests, but the idea of you have something to say to the world. It's called, you know, it's the gospel. You have something to say. The church is actually giving you holy orders to say it, and you should be finding a way to say it as much as you can, and in whatever ways you can, you know. It'd be like, you know, a priest from the 12th century not going to the town square to preach the gospel or something. It's like, that's the town square is now the media, right? And, you know, you don't have to be an expert. You just have to do it, you know? So anyway.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's kind of the little bit about us in a nutshell.
So what projects are you working on right now? Any Any big things that you're kind of either recording or in the process?
We work on a lot of different stuff. I can talk to, we're working with a native indigenous-led agency, working with an energy company, actually, doing training and education through short film and actual training promotions and things like that. So a lot of indigenous work, a lot of energy work, working with communities to help. Basically what it is when energy companies come and they have labor, they bring in lots of people, and human trafficking, sex trafficking goes up,
Yeah.
So we have to do awareness on human trafficking and sex trafficking, kind of indigenous people's education and training, because a lot of energy projects go through indigenous lands. So it's helpful for those workers in those communities to understand what that means. What does it mean to be, federally recognized as a reservation? What does that mean legally? What does that mean historically? What is the history of it? So we're working on a big campaign on human trafficking, on sex trafficking. That's been 18 months long. I think we got like one more month, maybe 3 more months left. And then that's in Minnesota. Then we're doing this in Wisconsin as well to some degree. So that's a big project that takes up a lot of my time, that I'm kind of a creative lead on.
What's your favorite project that you guys have worked on together in the last how long you been together? 10 years?
Coming up on 15, I think, right? 14.
Yeah, it'll be
14 this year, 15 next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your answer, John?
That's a, I mean, there's probably a short list that I can come up with. It's hard to nail down a favorite because they're good for different reasons. I mean, the stuff we did with Thermistor and the Air Max was super fun because they went with our creative to just be like out there and crazy. And, we had ninjas and a stunt driver and an explosion. We hired a pyrotechnic guy to like blow up a product and stuff. So that one was really fun, because it was just like, we were laughing so much when we were writing that one, because we were like talking about something. We're just like, then ninjas come out and we're just like shaking our heads like, this is so stupid and it's perfect. Like, just, so that one's always going to have a special spot, I think, is one of the projects. We did one a little more recently. I guess it's been about 2 years ago now, for MG&E. It was a social millennial marketing kind of thing.
Are you sure it wasn't 3 years ago? 3 years ago?
Was it 3? Holy cow!
I think it might have been.
Called EV Land, which is kind of a homage to La La Land. And we worked with the Madison Ballet and had this whole huge choreographed scene through a traffic jam that we like closed down a street in Warner Park area. There were like hundreds involved in that production. So that one was a cool one. And then there's one very recent that I'm super proud of, that it's not out yet, but our studio shoot we just did with Ho Chunk Casino Madison was hilarious and amazing work with some really talented comedic actors. And then Luke Kolarski built an amazing set in the studio that opened up. It was on rollers or whatever. So it revealed a sort of like, it's kind of like a Old Spice, Snickers commercial, breaking reality sort of thing. Like,
That sounds reminds me of an idea of, I always thought it'd be fun to do like a confessional video, but do it like in that same kind of style. Or like the, what was that, Dollar Shave Club? He used to have a crazy commercial where he's just walking around throwing stuff, doing stuff, that style, but do it for like a confessional tutorial, I don't know. It'd be fun to try to figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, well, we totally ripped off the Dollar Shave Club commercial, the Thermostor project. The first Thermostor project we did was that, and then the second one was an action film. So, yeah, those are definitely some of the fun ones.
Ryan, but do you have one that like either the same or like in addition to that stand? I did just think of another one.
Yeah, I mean, those are really good. EV Land's probably one of my favorites. Just working with Charlie's always been super rewarding and fun, and that project is amazing. The other projects you mentioned are so good too. One of the things we did with Carbon 4, it even had like bad audio because we recorded it in the studio, but I just thought it was a very pretty project, and it was one of the first projects that we could do what we wanted to do as opposed to the client telling us how it had to be. The Feliz Navidad, where we filmed what the heck was his name? Film the artist who paints all their paintings, painting it while we hear Ryan talking about how he's going to create the beer, because they create the beer and the painting kind of concurrently, and seeing that process come together was really, really fun. So that's kind of an oldie but a goodie, and probably better in my heart and in memory than it is in real life. But I remember that one.
Yeah, here I'll drop these three on you, and then I'll take off. These are just, I'll plant the seed. Okay, these are just because once I'm back in the diocese, I definitely want to try to work with you guys a lot on different ideas and see what we can come up with. But
awesome.
I'd love to do, like I told you at the party that we were at a couple weeks ago, Ryan. The idea of like the first 30 days after ordination, like a little mini doc, like 15, 20 minute type thing, interspersed with a couple, interviews from like, the bishop and some older priests, some younger priests, that kind of thing. Just what was their experience, and just throw that together. That's one idea. The other one, I'd love to make I don't know if you guys have seen this documentary, but it's called Into the Bottle. It was an old, maybe 5 years ago on Netflix. It's a wine documentary. Anyway, one of the chapters essentially of the documentary was on like, the word divine literally means from the vine. So there's this connection with wine and divinity, really in antiquity. I mean, for all of mankind in the Mediterranean world anyway. And so like one of the guys in one of the documentary, one of the interviews literally says, I don't even know if he's Catholic or Christian, but he says, I think there's a reason that Jesus picked this drink as his drink, like it clearly fit everything he was doing. So he's kind of talking about it from just a basic perspective, right? But I'd love to make a documentary on, the spirituality of like wine and winemaking, and then the crossover to the spiritual life, because there's a lot of connections. Plus, the cinematography in a vineyard just does the work for you, right? But so keep that in mind. And then the third one would be kind of our storytelling idea we were talking about. It would be like doing some snapshots with priests, probably older priests, it would have to be. But like, tell me a story about a time, of like someone you worked with and walked with, and like how they grew, or how they, like, even from the Breaking Bad perspective, how did they grow with you, or how did they flee from you? But like most older priests have these stories like in their background, and maybe they could tell the story in a way that concealed the identity of the person, obviously, but could speak of the process of that human connection. So
yeah, we've Ryan and I have talked before about how cool it would be And it would be extremely challenging to do without like affecting it in doing it. It's like cinema verite. Like, how do you record it without affecting the outcome? And it could be heartbreaking too, but to do something kind of like on conversion and sort of like walk with people like on the edge of that, and then like you would see like what choices are made in the end, and sort of have this like ability to like see maybe what led to think, to them
Yeah.
choosing it or whatever.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah, experience
obviously
it with them.
I would have my slant on what, which one was the right choice, but like.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys
I'm
have ever
writing these
seen.
down.
Okay.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm writing these down real quick. Yeah, the first 30 days. What was the second one?
The vineyard one, or the wine and spiritual life.
Oh yeah, yeah, got it.
And I've even heard there's a priest in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, Father John Burns. I think I don't know if he's written about this, but I think he has I've heard from other priests that he has an interesting perspective on this idea too, because just for example, someone who owns a vineyard, right? There'll be times where they don't water, right, the vines. And they do that on purpose so that the vines go deeper in search of water, because that makes it a healthier plant, helps the plant, helps it to grow, but it also exposes it to all kinds of nutrients that aren't it's already sucked all the nutrients, so to speak, out of the higher soil, so it has to keep digging. So like, that's just an idea where you could take that idea and you could build it out in a few different chapters in 40 minutes or something. So yeah, plenty of good stuff there.
It sounds like he's going to write a book. I do want to get you out of here though. It's 12:40.
Yep.
Last thing, anything you want to share? Anybody discerning, like what? Hey, maybe I could be a priest, or maybe I could be a sister. What do they do?
I think the first thing is to not put too much pressure on yourself. I think there should be a certain level of peace that's recognizable in your decision-making process and what God's trying to do with you. So I'd say, like, first, just don't put too much pressure on yourself. Along with that is kind of what I mentioned earlier. Be honest. And one of the best ways to be honest is to talk to somebody you trust. Okay. And then the third thing is that God speaks to us through our experiences. And additionally, after our experiences, through the church. So go over, if you're discerning what you want to do and what you think, what are the experiences that you feel like God has given you that have made you think about this, right? Have made you think about either getting married or going to religious life or priesthood. And then discuss those with the person you trust and be honest about it. Because I think every person is going to have something specific, some specific experience or experiences that move them this direction. And those are important to analyze. That's really what you're discerning. You're not discerning kind of the big picture right away. You're discerning these little motivating experiences and trying to dig into those and seeing what was really happening there, and to make sure you're not deceiving yourself. That's another, because that can happen. That's why you want to talk to somebody about it. So, and keep praying, and God will keep speaking to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that advice, and thank you for hanging out and talking with us. I think sometimes people don't know what to expect, but this was awesome, and I love that we got into Breaking Bad and storytelling, and this was all the right things for me. So thank you for jumping on and hanging out with us. John, do you got anything for us?
Nice to meet you. I don't think I've met you before, so it's nice to meet you.
I've
heard your name.
We probably, same. We probably met 4 years ago at one of the interviews that you
Okay,
guys did
yeah.
for us, but it would have been for, a couple minutes. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But
Yeah,
no, it's great
awesome.
to spend time with you guys for sure. Thank you for the invitation, and I enjoyed myself a lot. So thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew, for coming on. Good luck in your studies and ordination. We'll be
Yes.
praying definitely for you. Please pray for us.
Yeah.
And for those watching at home, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for commenting. Do all the things like subscribe. You'll get notified each week when we go live. Next week, we've got Carolyn Averill, and we're actually going to do it a little bit later because we're driving back from Minneapolis, and it'll be great because it'll be a little more happy hour time. We can have some drinks. So I think it's 3:00 next week. It's going to be awesome. We just finished a big web project with her. So we can talk to her all about that and maybe ask her opinion about Breaking Bad because she's one of my recommendation friends. Like I take recommendations from her seriously. She takes them seriously from me. So I'm sure she's got some great opinions on that. You should also make sure you check out our podcast, wherever podcasts are sold. This show is a podcast. So Matthew, you're going to be in the podcast at some point as soon as we get it edited. We're about 50 episodes behind, but they're coming out because we had such a backlog when we started this through COVID. So you can check that out at letsbackup.com/letsbackup-show, or go to our website, hit the podcast button in the menu, or just look it up on wherever your podcasts are sold. That's what we got. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Later. Bye.